Ms. Brown, you say that someday we can set it aside. How will we know when we can? A lot of people look at, for example, the election of President Barack Obama and say, hey, we're doing okay. But if that's not a good indicator, how will we know when America's ready to retire programs like affirmative action?
Well, I think we'll know. I think we know now that it's not time. I mean, you don't have to walk around Salt Lake City long before you see that it is still a white-dominated culture. And I don't know what the target date will be, but I don't think Barack Obama is the end of all things. I think when we see, well, what I was thinking about is I have a friend who's Greek, and her culture is very important to her. But I've got to say, nobody cares except for her and her family and her fellow members. But when we get there, we'll know it. When we walk past, what I do know is we're not there yet. I don't know what the time will be.
Response?
I would say that in its origins, affirmative action as a policy of non-discrimination, the entire nation benefited from. Affirmative action, as it was modified in 1965 to include preferences, I think that the number of beneficiaries are vastly smaller than people believe. And I think that we should not wait until more Americans are resentful, until the reality of Richard Sander, who is a law professor, a liberal law professor at UCLA, until the reality that he identified, which is that affirmative action as a form of preferences, really harms the intended beneficiaries. You know, we can get so invested in a policy that we simply refuse to stand back and say, is this really doing what we intend? What is our objective? Our objective should be to help kids who need help, to help people who need help, based on their income, based on their socioeconomic conditions.
But you know, income is not the only thing that holds people back.
I'm aware of that. But it's not the purpose of government to remedy every disparity that might be found in American life. In my view, and this is my personal view, it's the responsibility of government to treat me as an equal. I don't have any choice about whether I support the government. On April 15th, if I don't, they send a posse out to get me. Therefore, I think the government has a duty to treat me as an equal.
And let me follow up by asking you the next question. Dr. Martin Luther King said that with equal opportunity must come the practical, realistic aid which will equip him to seize it. Now, when my sons, I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and when they are college age and as they're working their way through high school, they will have behind them, probably still living, 2 generations of family members that have had experience applying for and funding college. They'll be up against applicants who are first-generation Americans, children of immigrants, parents don't speak English. When they go head-to-head in applying for, say, the University of Utah, pardon me, will they truly be on an equal playing field without affirmative action?
Quien sabe. But I think that, and there are all kinds of studies to address this question, but I think that it's our duty to make sure that they at least perceive that they're up against equal chances.
Well, I mean, they have to also really have an equal chance.
They have to have an equal chance, and that means that the government should not have policies that institutionally treat them differently. They have to know that. They have to know that. That's the first step toward making sure that we have equal treatment, to have a policy foundation that guarantees that. We can snicker about that all we want, but you know, there are certain truths that are supposed to be self-evident. One of them is that we have this presumption of equal treatment by our government. because our good Lord has made us as equal in his own eyes. The government should not come along and alter that by a stroke of the pen.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question here. In that scenario with my own kids and the, I mean, I say it's hypothetical, it'll take place in the future, but it will happen. My children will be up against these kinds of applicants. How can we as a society, speaking on the practical side, how can we break the cycle of poverty that we see in so many immigrant families without having some way to recognize that, yes, you have an experience and you have a perspective that's fundamentally different than the children of Ethan Millard?
It's a different thing than race, my friend. It's a far different thing. There's nothing that prevents us from doing that. In fact, in California, when we eliminated race and gender and ethnic preferences, we went precisely to that. It's called comprehensive review. We look at applicants on the basis of factors other than their race, other than their ethnic background, other than their gender. We look at what do they bring to the process. Did they have a family, parents that went to college? Are they low income? Did their school offer honors courses? There are all kinds of things that we can look at that are legitimate in the admissions process and that tell us something about that student. But looking at a person's race doesn't tell us that. It might have at one time, in fact it did. But now looking at a person's race doesn't suggest very little about them.
Would you like
I would love to respond in a couple different ways. One, simply stated, well, let me back up a sec. Yes, public health is going to be affected, and experts in Utah's public health community have said so in terms of the way that the constitutional amendment is written. And I guess that's part of the problem with not studying it adequately. So yes, it would affect public health. In answer simply to your question, Ethan, no, there's not a level playing field there. And you do need programs, and I want to talk about one of them. There's a great program, and I almost hesitate to say what it is because it's a program that very well could, a couple of programs that could go away if this constitutional amendment were to pass. One of them, fortunately, it's federally funded, so maybe this wouldn't have to go away, but Upward Bound. How many of you know Upward Bound? How many of you were students at Upward Bound? Okay. A few of you in the audience. Okay. Here's a program that one of the criteria for Upward Bound is first-generation college student. Okay. But if you go into, and this is a program that takes high school students throughout their career in high school and brings them up to the college, connects them with college students, gets them up to the college environment, and mentors them and tutors them, gets them prepared for college. Okay. First-generation college student is one of those barriers that they're trying to address. But if you walk into that room, 99% are going to be of a racial or ethnic minority. So it goes to show you that still is a need for those types of programs to do outreach, to make sure that there is a level playing field, that they are competing with your sons and daughters on that level playing field. Okay? Another program I already spoke about. Okay? University of Utah has a university neighborhood program, a partnership program, in the middle of my district in Glendale, because they identified an area in our Salt Lake City, which is racially and ethnically diverse, that represents the populations of those that are being underserved in their university, and they're there 24 hours a day. They're there 7 days a week. They're a part of the community. The whole idea is to connect, to get individuals there. That's going to level the playing field. But those are the types of equal opportunity programs. It's not about preferences. It keeps on saying it. It's not about preferential treatment. It does not exist. The programs that we're going to be eliminating are programs like Upward Bound and programs like the University Neighborhood Partnership Outreach. Those are the programs that are going to be eliminated through this type of constitutional amendment. Let me tell you, bring up California. The Berkeley Law School, okay? First post-affirmative action class. Out of a class of 270 students, there was one African American who deferred from the previous year. 0 American Indians. Today, entering black law students at Berkeley, Davis, and UCLA comprise less than 3%. Latino enrollment likewise dropped by nearly 50% in the wake of Prop 209. Is that a successful policy?
No.
Is that what we want to see instead of seeing an increasing diversity in our colleges, in our universities, in our workforce? Do we want to see a decrease?
No.
Those are the results of this type of policy.
Can I just say one thing? Just
Yeah,
one thing?
sure, briefly, yeah.
Really briefly. Mr. Connolly said when college students make their applications, what they look at is what do they bring to the process. And I've got to say, if race, ethnicity, and gender are not central to what someone brings to the process, I don't understand it, because why would we do that? Why would we take that away? That's an important part of how people see each other and who they are and what they would do for the college. So obviously.
Representative Oda, I couldn't help but notice the number of times you shook your head during all of that. Do you want to respond?
No.
Well, let me just say one thing, and then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Connolly, because he needs to respond to this Berkeley and the California University issues. But Upward Bound is not going to be affected simply because that is a federally funded program. Any program that involves federal funding is not going to be impacted. I'm a little bit frustrated with that being brought up, and
Well, so how many programs would actually be affected in the state?
Upward Bound is not one of these.
Right, I know, but
And I did say that. I did say that Upward Bound may not be affected because it's federally funded. I did say that.
Right, but then later on you said we're going to lose that, and then, so
Talked about the programs in my
But
district.
if I could ask you very quickly, we have a lot of programs in the state that use, someone shouted out matching funds and other types of mechanisms. How many programs would actually be affected by your amendment?
I can't answer how many programs, but there's going to be, obviously there's going to be some programs, but anything that's federally funded is not going to be impacted. So that's a frustration of anything that's being said there.
Let me ask a question to address I asked your question, and then it went to the rebuttal, and then back here, so I've got a question for you guys. Am I getting the math right? Would you like to respond quickly?